Mark and I got married in 2005, and a year later, I started feeling really bad. Had a lot of vertigo and tingling and fatigue. That following year got really bad, and in July I was diagnosed with MS. And at first we were both terrified.
It was hard. That was a tough time.
I mean, immediately my response wasn't, I got to simplify things. I'm a slow learner. So I decided I had to really push hard to prove that I was okay. And so I worked more. I worked out more. I really pushed myself for probably that first month, and I felt terrible.
In any disease or sickness, one of the biggest factors, one of the things that contributes to these things in a negative way is the stress in your life. By getting rid of these things in our lives, these material items and all this excess that we used to live in, good things happen.
Since then, I have not had what I would consider a relapse. I'm in better health than I was before I was diagnosed. People always tell you, or at least they did for me in the early stages of MS, you have to listen to your body. I'm like, listen to my body? I can't even listen to my family. I don't know how I'm going to hear my body. And so as I started to move that stuff out, I was able to finally realize what I had sacrificed by being busy, by engaging in constant work.
We have this capacity for focus, but we're living in a context where we are continually moving from one stimulus to the next in search of the dopamine experience, where we're rewarded by the next email or the next retweet or the next thing that comes into our phone rather often. I think there's a price we pay for that.
It's really become an issue. There was a Nokia study that says the average person checks his or her phone like 150 times a day.
You walk down the street in any major city, you're locked into their devices. We are totally in the matrix. And it's easier to be mindless and just read the paper, update your social media feed, and consume.
Because you can do anything you want, you can potentially do everything you want. But to do everything you want, you have to sacrifice the things that really are important. When it comes to the overwhelm, the easiest way to solve that is to turn it off. Really, just turn it off.
It was really powerful to realize that most of my life was in a daydream.
In an apparent attempt to garner sympathy,
I got here to ABC News when I was 28 years old. I was a really ambitious young guy. And my way of compensating for my insecurity about being such a newbie was to throw myself into the job and really become a workaholic. And after 9/11, I raised my hand to go overseas and cover the ensuing conflicts.
We were fortunate this week to have our reporter Dan Harris on a trip organized by the Taliban.
We arrived at night, a spine-rattling ride down a single, mangled road into a city under siege.
Spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan without really thinking much about the psychological consequences. And when I came home from a particularly long trip in Iraq, I got depressed. And then I did something really, really dumb, which was I started to self-medicate with recreational drugs. It was enough, according to my doctor, to provoke a panic attack on live television.
We're going to go now to Dan Harris, who's at the news desk. Dan.
Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production. That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie. It raised the level of adrenaline in my brain, which, according to my doctor, primed me to lose it on Good Morning America in front of 5 million people. 5.019 million people, according to the Nielsen ratings. That moment set me off on a weird and windy road that ultimately led me to the last thing that I ever thought would be useful for anybody, which was meditation.
We're ruminating about past and future in a way that keeps us from really connecting with the present moment in a way that values it as good enough. Meditation is a technique of finding well-being in the present moment before anything happens. You can be happy and satisfied simply being aware of the sensation of breathing. Very rarely are we fully dedicated to one thing. We're interrupting ourselves or allowing ourselves to be interrupted by these streams of data and what would in any other context be thought of as distractions, but now we think of them as just sort of all necessary parts of our bandwidth.
If I leave my phone in my pocket and it's on vibrate mode, unconsciously I'll flinch when it vibrates. I even flinch when it doesn't vibrate, thinking it vibrates. And that kills that little discussion. Like those nanoseconds of distraction, I think has a hugely detrimental effect. Everywhere I look, it's like constant high-frequency flinches.
This anticipation of novelty has the character of making us the lab rat that's just pressing the bar. Meditation is a great antidote to that.
People around here at ABC News would ask me, why are you meditating? Parenthetically, what's the matter with you? What happened to you? Eventually, I started to answer, because it makes me about 10% happier. And I could see the looks transform from scorn/skepticism into interest. Like, oh, that sounds reasonable. I'd like that. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever received in my entire life was from a meditation teacher named Joseph Goldstein. I was asking him about the utility of worry. In the specific context, I was talking about whether it makes sense to worry about missing a flight. And I was arguing to him that, look, you Buddhists are always talking about how thoughts are just thoughts. They don't necessarily have any connection to reality. But the fact is, if I miss my flight, I'm screwed. And he said, you're unquestionably correct. But there's a certain amount of worry that makes sense and a certain amount of worry that doesn't. So on the 17th time that you're worrying about missing your flight and all of the horrible ramifications, maybe ask yourself a simple question. Is this useful? Boom. For a guy who'd spent his whole life worrying and thinking that my worrying was the edge I had over everybody else, because I knew I was going to be more anxious and more compulsive than any of my competitors, I realized there's a certain amount of worrying that is what I call constructive anguish, and then there's useless rumination. That's just making you miserable. It's not like I'm 100% mindful all the time. I still do an enormous amount of stupid shit. And if my wife was here, she would give you the 90% still a moron spiel. There's just no question that I'm still an idiot in lots of ways. But I'm less of an idiot and less of a jerk and more thoughtful and more focused and calmer.
We've been on tour all year, and just when I start to think if we're getting through, if we're making a difference, the Today Show gives us a call and asks us to be on. Now we have an opportunity to share this with millions of people, which is huge.
Dude, we're actually late now, so we gotta go.
The entrance is...
Where's the address? It's 35?
Yeah, but you'll see like the Today Show stuff set up. Oh, right there.
You sure this is it?
Yep. Go downstairs. Ooh, we're together.
It's the most wonderful time. From NBC News, this is Today.
With Black Friday, Cyber Monday, boughs of holly, and stuffed stockings, it can start to feel like the holidays are more about more and less about what's really important.
Joshua Fields, Milburn, and Ryan Nicodemus have come to see things differently. They are what you call the minimalists.
In a hypothetical world, what if one of you falls madly in love with a maximalist who likes her stuff? What are you going to do?
No, that's a great question. My girlfriend, actually, I live with, I don't think she would call herself a minimalist. She's got about 20 pairs of shoes.
Well, that's nothing compared to
But what I will say is that her and I have very similar values and beliefs.
Yeah.
We respect one another. We love one another. We appreciate one another.
It's a great lifestyle, great topic for today, especially,
it's great
guys.
to meet you both.
Yeah, the
Merry Christmas to you.
Minimalist latest book, Everything That Remains, is in stores right now.
What a concept.
So the event last night was crazy. We showed up, the store owner had about 30 chairs out. I asked him to put out more chairs, and he was like, are you sure you're gonna need more chairs? Ken Burns was here, and he maxed out all my seating. I got 60 chairs total. And I said, yeah, I think we'll have about 50 or 60 people show up. Go ahead and bring the rest of the chairs out. And we ended up having like 150, 200 people show up. I mean, people were standing on the bookshelves, wall to wall.
What's up, brother? Hey, thanks for everything you do. I think your story came at the right time.
Serendipity.
You guys are my inspiration.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad we can help. Thanks for coming out, brother.
We're seeing more and more and more people show up, so it's great to see the message is spreading.
So we are on our way to LA. It's going to be our biggest venue so far, expecting one of our biggest crowds. And really, I think LA is a city that could really use this message.
We like things little, but we love things big. Yeah, I grew out of it, and you just fit right in. Design and find what is a space inside my mind. Philosophy of nothing in plain sight. Something so familiar, so foreign. Forget to remember to forget. The same art, just a different medium. A moving canvas, a picture of myself. We like things little, but we love things big. Yeah, I grew out of it, and you just fit right in.
Cars, homes,
and 6-digit salaries. It may sound like a dream life. Joshua Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus on a world book tour, and here to explain why someone would just give up all of this stuff.
Letting it go was really difficult. I wish I could say it was as easy as renting a dumpster and throwing away all my stuff, but it was really a process.
Everything was someday fade. The truth is we're not leaving, because our love is all that remains.
I love watching how it's spreading like wildfire and in a good way. It's like a good plague.
A startling new study shows a huge number of children under the age of 4 have access to a mobile device, and some of those kids started using them before they were 1 year old.
We're building more competitive, more interesting environments for the consumer. This means ingesting signals they're telling us about their interest and making sure we can control what message they see next.
Toronto-based ad exec has written an op-ed in the Globe and Mail saying it's time we stop advertising to children.
Advertising to children has existed for so long. What's changed, though, is the amount of this advertising and the media through which this advertising comes.
Historically, companies which had products aimed at kids would go toward the mothers and getting the mothers to want to buy the stuff for the kids. What happens is the companies decide to go around the mothers and go directly to the kids.
I don't know what the most common 3 words are in American homes. I don't know if it's I love you or if it's I want that. 5,000 advertisements we see every single day from the moment we're born. And they all tell us, hey, this is what your life should be about. It should be about accumulating more things, or it should all be about focusing on you.
If you guys have walked around, a kid's store lately, but it's kind of incredible. Anything you ever could have dreamed of has been thought of.
Advertisers have just realized there's this huge market. There are parents who want to give their kids the best, and they're really working hard to go that angle.
There's a problem of both process and content, and the problem of content is huge. The products that are being advertised to kids are junk.
Welcome to New Mania Wrestling! 120 new characters you can collect! The secret is their flexi spine!
It's a junk culture. It's food that's bad for them. It's crappy toys that are gendered and violent. I don't see the argument for subjecting children to this. Like, there's no positive social benefit from it. We just know there's a negative. And it's just the political power of advertising and the companies that do the advertising that keeps us from doing something about it.
So I've heard someone say, there's another word for minimalism, it's called being a bachelor. So that's, yeah, I mean, I can see how people think, oh, that's really easy if you're not married and you have no kids. How do I set an example of myself being married and having 6 kids, which is totally unminimalist and very ironic? How do I live a minimalist lifestyle with those kinds of constraints?
Jacko and I haven't been too prescriptive about, like, no, you have 5 toys, No, dude, you can only have 1 truck. You can't have 3 trucks, It's like, no. When I was a little kid, I didn't have 1 G.I. Joe. I had, like, 100 G.I. Joes.
We've welcomed things into our life, but definitely with the intention of thinking about what we're doing as opposed to just consuming.
When you live with other people and you're a family, you can't just make unilateral decisions. Okay, we're now getting rid of everything and throwing the TV out the door. There will be a riot. That's a little bit frustrating because you can't just get your way. But it's also a really interesting experiment in how you can move together as a group and learn about this together as a group.
At the very beginning, when we decided to live with less, we knew early on that minimalism was just going to look like the way we wanted it to look. I remember going through, getting rid of things and finally saying, okay, Salem, let's go through your toys and let's get rid of some of the things that you don't need anymore. And he had no problem whatsoever. My daughter is 7, and she is very different. She loves every doll that she can get. Like, she collects rocks and twigs and anything else she can find, she collects and she holds on to. As parents, we get to set some boundaries for her, but ultimately we let her choose what she wants.
I think he certainly has been at a different level of minimalism than I am. He wanted to get rid of more than I wanted to get rid of, and so there comes the compromise. His side of the closet looks much smaller than my side of the closet, and that's okay with us.
You know, I think one of the lessons that we've learned through this whole journey is just that our kids are really watching us. And we can tell them that we want them to be certain people, but man, they're picking up a lot more just from how we live our lives. This is undercurrent of consumerism, removing some of that stuff, provided a safe environment where they're able to become what they most want to be, rather than what the world will try to convince them to be.
Good evening. It's clear that the true problems of our nation are much deeper than gasoline lines or energy shortages, deeper even than inflation or recession. In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. But we've discovered that owning things and consuming things does not satisfy our longing for meaning. We've learned that piling up material goods cannot fill the emptiness of lives which have no confidence or purpose. This is not a message of happiness or reassurance, but it is the truth, and it is a warning.
We think we need those things because we've been told we need those things. We've been told we need those things by our society. It's been this kind of slow little thing that's just kind of trickled in, and suddenly it becomes the thing you do. It really does come down to a value-based ideal. You want to do the most amount of good and get the most amount of value with exactly what you need. Having too little is not going to give you that, and having too much is not going to give you that, right? Having that balance, having enough, that's what you're looking for.
If I had to revise the American dream, it would be more about coming together in community. It would be more about a society which had much less inequality and more fairness, in which everybody had a chance, and that is responsible toward the planet and our ecosystem. To me, that would be an American dream.
When you talk about not consuming, people think, well, you're trying to take something away from them. But the truth of the matter is that I think that what this movement is really about is questing after a life that's good for ourselves and good for the people around us.
So we're in LA right now. We're here for our biggest event. What we're trying to do is show people that there's a different way for us to live.
The people you bring into your life, you should always be hanging out with people who have the same values. And that's really what minimalism is about. It's about living deliberately. So every choice that I make, every relationship, every item, every dollar I spend, I'm not perfect, obviously, but I do constantly ask the question, is this adding value? Am I being deliberate with this decision?
Go see him tonight at the last bookstore in Los Angeles at 7 o'clock. Thank you, Joshua and Ryan, for coming in.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I was so focused on what my idea of success was. My idea of success was making more money. I said my relationships were a priority. Well, I didn't pay any attention to the people closest to me, including my mom.
The whole point of this message, the whole point of us sharing this story, is to help people curb that appetite for more things, because it's such a destructive path to go down. I literally have used people to sell cell phones. I've used people to get bigger and better clients. And what I love about my life now is I can be genuine, and that there is no manipulation.
It is my very, very great pleasure to introduce Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, the Minimalists.
Imagine a life with less. A life of passion unencumbered by the trappings of the chaotic world around you. Well, what you're imagining is an intentional life. It's not a perfect life, and it's not even an easy life, but a simple one.
what I found with minimalism is it's a way of saying, let's stop the madness.
You don't need this stuff. Like, it's not going to do it. It's not the answer.
There's a movement growing. I don't think that there's a cap to it.
I'm now surrounded by people who are inspired in creating massive social change and impact. The depth and profundity of my relationships is beyond anything I could have ever imagined.
When you recognize that this life is yours, and that it is your one and only, and when that ceases to be the esoteric bullshit, when that's not hippie poetry anymore, when the pragmatism of that statement seeps directly in your bones and you recognize that this is it, everything changes.
I don't know where you are on your journey, where you are in life, or wherever you're going on that journey, but we are really grateful you're here with us tonight. So if I could give you one takeaway, one thing to bring away from all of this, it'll be this. Love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thank you so much for coming out.